Welcome everyone to InfoSec Live, where we give you, our audience, the chance to learn from and interact with our industry's leadership. And today we've got a very special episode where we get to hear from Zach Kromkowski of Sentian, who are a turnkey cybersecurity platform designed to empower those forgotten by large security corporations. I think we can all feel that pain a little bit. But before we get into the show, my name's Simon Linstead, the founder of the InfoSec Live community and also your host for the show. And by sharing stories and best practices over the last few months, it's led to over 100,000 views of our content here on YouTube by you, our amazing subscribers. So a huge thank you for your engagement. And thanks to your support, it's also led to the launch of our in-person community-driven leadership events in the UK and US, with a focus on knowledge sharing, networking, and definitely no sales pitches. So if you're a vendor and interested in building relationships with leadership and sponsoring our events, or indeed featuring on this channel, please do reach out to me today. You can get hold of me, if I can find the QR code quick enough. Where is it? Here it is. It's turned all the chat off as well for some reason. You can get hold of me in the community. QR code is there. Please scan to join if you're not a member already. We've also got group study sessions, CV workshops, networking sessions, job alerts, and over 5,000 members helping each other every single day. So make sure you check out the community if you haven't already, using that QR code right there. If you'd like to support the wider InfoSec Live community, or indeed buy me a cheeky decaf coffee, we do have a way you can show your appreciation with 3 tiers of membership right here on the YouTube channel, hopefully giving anyone the ability to support where they can. But whether you join or not, being here and engaging with our content is what really matters. So if you're watching this live, please do like and subscribe. We want to make these events as interactive as possible, so make sure you drop any questions you have in the chat. Okay, time for Simon to stop rambling on for a moment. Time for the show. Let's bring Zach on and dig into the subject today, which is CIS in vendors. Right. You can tell it's been a long day. I've left the QR code up covering my face. I got rid of the messages when I played the stinger. But apart from that, Zach, welcome. Great to have you here.
Amazing to be here. And I don't know what's more impressive, the no caffeine or the 100,000 views. It's quite the decisions you make for your lifestyle, Simon.
The caffeine's a difficult one till about 2 in the afternoon, I think, and it hasn't got any easier. And I think the biggest learning point from that was the chronic headaches you get for 3 or 4 weeks when you actually stop drinking it. But yeah,
I will have my cup
I'm soldiering
right
on
next to me.
Okay, Zach, look, again, thanks for coming on. I want you to tell our audience a little bit about yourself before we dig into what it is you guys do at Sentian. So if you could tell people a bit about Zach, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everyone for having me here today. Really excited about the topic. So I am Zach, one of the 4 co-founders to Senteon. And what we're really doing is providing a proactive preventative security solutions for the SMB and channel market. So who am I? I am a college graduate from Purdue University. Actually got my start in entrepreneurship, focusing on home restoration, a lot of painting involved, which me and Simon definitely bonded over. Yeah. Big painters. But after going into corporate, really realized that entrepreneurship was in me at that point, and I had to go back to it. And with the security boom over the last decade, I mean, it was too hot of an industry not to be interested in. And Joe, thanks for the compliment in the comments.
Loves the beard. Bit of beard envy going on there, Joe, I think.
Yeah, that's really who I am. So really excited to be here.
Okay, cool. So how long since Sentian came about?
Yeah, so we've been a company for nearly 4 years now, but as any entrepreneurs in the audience today understand is we probably haven't been doing the same thing over all 4 years. So we actually started as like a law firm database company, then tried to play with the competitive space of EDRs with the CrowdStrikes, the S1s, and then we were like, what if we just did an antivirus and all these other pivots? Ultimately, as any good entrepreneur, you fail a lot. I think you
Yeah,
talk about this sometimes, Simon.
I do.
But
Yeah, I've been
eventually,
very good at failing in the past. Yeah.
hey, that's the best way to first success. So after all those fails and all that better understanding of the market, we really identified this concept of preventative, proactive security through the concept of system hardening. And that's really where things have taken off. And over the last year, it's been a much more exciting ride than the last three.
I, I can only imagine. It sounds to me, and this is kind of what I've inferred from looking on you guys' website, because we haven't really had a chance to talk about what you do, but it looks like you're trying to help the companies out there who are being left alone a little bit by the bigger players as well. And in fact, I think it's next week, I've got Joe Evangelisto and two other CISOs coming on for a chat about the challenges of being an SMB
Yeah.
CISO. We've seen the last decade, enterprise level firms, those a bit smaller, they've all embraced security, some better than others. They're all spending lots of money on it. But when it comes to the smaller organizations, a lot of people feel a little bit left out. Talk to me about the problem that you're solving, because you must have seen a problem that
Yeah,
needed
we
solving.
definitely saw a lot of problems. And talking about this difference between enterprise security and SMB security, it's massive, right? The enterprises can handle, large security teams. They can support them. They can pay them what they need. While these SMBs maybe only have one dedicated security guy and then a couple IT guys working alongside him who also get wrapped up into security. I don't think that's uncommon.
Yeah.
So what we really began to understand. So the really focus on Senteon is OS hardening to Windows workstations, servers, and pretty soon here we'll be hardening browsers as well. So what this means is we're touching hundreds of configurations. We're changing them, we're tracking them, we're monitoring them, we're doing testing to make sure they don't cause disruption. All of these very manual tasks we're automating so that you can manage this in the SMB level. The
So,
reason it's
so, so the
really
problem you're solving is the lack of manpower, the lack of resources to get this
right.
done. Yeah. Right.
So
Okay.
that lack of manpower, exactly. So at the enterprise level, they may have a dedicated team to just testing configurations, seeing what
Yeah.
they can handle. They can roll it out, roll it back, no questions asked. That's literally someone's job. But at this SMB level, their job is to keep that business running. So changing these security settings and causing disruption, I mean, that can be detrimental. That can be your job in some cases. They can't really handle that. So the real problem to what you're asking that Senteon solves is we're making this concept of system hardening available and streamlined to the SMB market and even lower tier enterprises because it really does have a pretty large value prop.
Okay. Quick questions come in from Prashant there. With CIS hardening, is it necessary to get 100% compliance? Good question, Prashant.
Yeah, no, this is a great question. I get this all the time. So I mentioned in my introduction, we're doing hundreds of settings. The actual number to that is we actually handle nearly 900 settings. So the number one question that I get is, I am not going to let Senteon change 900 settings in my active environment. That's insane. I might as well unplug my computer with all the disruption that's going to happen. And Mad Dog, you're absolutely right. So if I were to just hit go with Senteon, you'd very likely have disruption. So short answer, no. Getting 100% isn't even the right thing to do for the majority of everyone, right? There's always exceptions. So another vendor that I work with, CyberQP, they have like a lapse solution. And part of the CIS benchmarks is to use Microsoft's built-in lapse.
Yeah.
Well, if you already have a third-party solution, possibly doing this better or more effective for your workflows, that's a case you wouldn't want to follow the CIS benchmarks, right? So there's always exceptions to the rule, and Senteon makes it a little bit easier to handle those exceptions, track them, and make sure they're up to date.
Okay. And I suppose the big question that you hear from a lot of vendors, especially newer startups, is how do you get in front of the right people, and how do you get that message across to them? Because for us, I mean, I say us, I'm not a security expert. I've learned an awful lot in the last 3 years, but I certainly wouldn't ever consider myself an expert, probably still a bit of a novice. But when it comes to dealing with CIOs, CEOs, CFOs, people on the board at SMBs, how do you get this message across?
I mean, getting the messaging across is one of the hardest things. And just like you, Simon, I didn't actually start in this industry. I talked about home restoration business, right? That has nothing to do with security or software for that matter. And the first part of your question, how do you get in front of these people? It's about building that personal brand. I think this is a topic that's constantly talked about, so I'm not going to beat into it anymore. But just to share my story, 3 years ago, I was one of the people out there who had less than 500 LinkedIn connections. You got to see my exact number. It wasn't 500 plus.
Yeah.
And now 3 years, started my own webinar series in the last few months. It's grown dramatically to where now it's about 7,000, which still not nearly where it could be, but it's getting that message out there, and it helps startups, especially past what we call the sniff test, right?
Well, let's stick on that, because we've got in that in common. So I've only been on LinkedIn, I think it's 2.5 years now I've been on LinkedIn, and I've got to be honest, there was never any intent to use it as a place to build up a personal brand. But over that time, every single piece of work and every single job I've got has been from LinkedIn. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is I've been very intentional with who I connect with, rather than just going for numbers. And I don't know what my follower count is at now. I know it's over 10,000, but I haven't gone after just a numbers game. I've gone for people who I think will add value to my network, or who I think I can add value to. Are you intentional with the way you connect, or are you a prolific social Saturday person on LinkedIn?
I do like to do my posting.
Do you do one? You do, yeah.
No, I mean, like you said, it quality definitely matters, for sure. So when I'm doing my proactive reach out, I absolutely have a targeted message, and it's the right people I want to connect with. And those inbound messages, for the most part, I am accepting a majority of the inbound, but it has to be something relevant to me. I am one of those people who will look at every single message and look at who actually sent it. If it's someone with, less than 300 connections, they're just trying to sell me something directly from the add a note page, then I'm not going to click yes. Like, to an extent, I'm not about the numbers, but Simon, I mean, it is exciting to see that go up, right?
It is exciting, although I do feel people get hung up on the vanity metric
Absolutely
side of it. And I know, without naming any names here, I know a lot of influencers on LinkedIn who've probably got 5, 10, 15 times the amount of followers that you and I have, who haven't monetized that in any way, shape or form. So for me, it's clearly a vanity metric. And I think you've got to be intentional with the information that you put out there as well. And there's been a lot of jumping on back. I mean, the horrific situation in Israel, I don't want to get into politics or war particularly.
That's hard.
It is hard. But the amount of people, and I deliberately haven't posted about that on LinkedIn, because I think it's too soon and it's too raw for a lot of people. But a lot of influencers have jumped on that bandwagon. And again, you think, come on, there's better ways to get the message out there, right?
I've definitely seen those posts coming through, and I do scroll past it. I'm very active on X and whatnot, and I've seen the real-time updates that X provides, right? It's horrifying, but I have made it intentional not to share my opinion, because again, I don't know the space. I don't truly know what's going on. And
I don't think, unless you've been brought up there, spent time there,
right,
I don't think any of us really know either.
Absolutely. And I'm not to say I'm close to it, but I mean, I do live, my wife works at Stanford University, and there are a lot of students that are impacted by this. Like, it is a very real thing for tons of people in the US. So hopefully everyone's respectful with it, but I do agree with your sentiment, man. There is a lot of just, I'm going to post about this because it's trending. It doesn't make sense.
It's not good. So, okay, back to, let's move away from that subject. I shouldn't have brought it up, really. It's meant to be a happy live stream.
It's modern, man. It's what's going on.
It is, and I think we're all affected by it, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Us in the UK here with what's going on in Ukraine, the world seems like it's going absolutely crazy at the moment. So for me, the more we can do to try and help each other, the better, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on to talking about where you see Sentian in 5 years' time. What's the plan?
Yeah. So I think any startup, you have to start up getting your niche and really mastering it. So I'll give the 5-year plan a bit of a milestone. So right now we're heavily focused on Windows machines and browser hardening, right? So in the next year, we want to expand this and really master this niche to do this on Macs, Linux, and really expand our footprint doing our core functionality, right?
Yeah.
But once we do grow past this, big shout out to CIS. They have published standards on multiple different softwares, AWS, Kubernetes, whatever that is, right? And I'd love for this technology to continue to grow and be this integration hub almost to where we're working with the other major enterprise players in ingesting data, vice versa, and really growing this into a strong platform that just fits, right?
I think that's again having a 5-year plan in any industry, never
Hard.
mind one that changes as much as this one does. I mean, it's not a trick question, but I think, as you'll know, as an entrepreneur, the ability to adapt and change at a whim
Yep.
is probably more relevant than anything else. Let's talk about the successes you've seen so far. Talk to me about those.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest success is just the mindset in the market. So, as a company, we chose to align ourselves with the CIS standards, which are basically globally recognized standards, and they're very prescriptive one-to-one recommendations on this setting should be enabled, this setting should be disabled, whatever that is. So they're very prescriptive. While other regulated frameworks, PCI, HIPAA, things, and even NIST, right, not regulated, but they're more open-ended, right? You need to perform this, but not telling you how to perform this. So we chose to align with CIS because of this fact. Man, Simon, hit me back with that question. Where was I going with this?
What was the question? The question was, talk to me about the successes that you've seen. You said a lot of it was the mindset shift. Yeah.
Right. So the mindset shift. When we entered the CIS, we actually really struggled with our initial go-to-market, landing those initial core-based customers. But ever since we landed that foundation and started to build this brand and talk about CIS, make it streamlined in general conversation, those successes have been continuing to come, whether it's inbound now, where I don't have to do all of my outbound generation like I used to. So the biggest success, honestly, is just the matter of getting CIS to be top of mind and having people come to us to talk about CIS and how we fit into CIS. So to me, that's my biggest win as an entrepreneur.
Oh, absolutely. And talk to me about how you've worked with CIS.
Yeah, so this is a pretty special thing that we've really been lucky to develop. So we are sponsors of CIS, so we're allowed to use their recommendations within our solution. So that's why we work together so well. Okay. But because we are directly entangled with them, right? We're doing everything to their standards. We've been fortunate enough to work with them a little bit more, to the point where one of the other challenges that we faced going to market was, what security risk is mitigated by hardening this setting, by changing this setting? What risk is actually mitigated? So what we did over at Sention was we rewrote these settings from a security point of view. What risk is actually being mitigated for all 500 plus of these settings? And CIS actually dedicated a resource to our team to perform weekly webinars with us and a special guest to just educate the market more on CIS, more on these settings, more about risk management. And it's been absolutely incredible. So that's a key factor of how we work with CIS.
That sounds awesome. I see John Van Houten's in the audience again. I was thinking of you and I was walking down that country lane earlier, John, looking at those cows. I know how much you want to come to the UK. John said vendor and specifics agnostic is what he calls NIST, as opposed to CIS, which is entirely defined. Then continues with both a value and a pitfall, since environments are dynamic and evolving and procedures need to change rapidly. Do you want to touch on either of those points?
Yeah, I mean, 100% agree with that first one, right? See, he loves that you called him out on that one.
I haven't had clotted cream for my tea though yet. Let me know if I do.
So absolutely. So CIS completely defined, which I love that you said value and a pitfall. So one of the things CIS does struggle with, right? This is a nonprofit. They do as much as they can, and they're extremely good at what they do. But in the security field, we are It's constantly changing. Just like John was here 1 minute and now he's out of
And
here.
now he's gone. Yeah.
It's constantly changing. So CIS can only be as powerful as the team that they have, right? They have an open source community where they want leaders to contribute and to continue to grow their standards and stay up to date with these new risks. But again, that's completely up to the market or up to the leaders who can contribute.
And how do they engage the leaders for that?
Yeah, so I haven't seen too much proactive outreach. I've actually learned a lot just from my webinars that I do with them. But they have, I think they call it the workbench, where CIS workbench, where you can join just free. It's completely free, of course, and you can add the leadership thoughts. You can contribute to standards, and you can really become part of that community.
Okay, and I think from having a little look on their website earlier, they give monthly updates out to all
Yeah.
their members as well. Yeah. Okay. Right. Moving on.
Newsletters are key.
Sorry. Say again.
Newsletters are key.
Newsletters are key. Here we go. Prashant, quick question from him. Is there a market or capability to do a form of hardening on Android-based devices?
You know, I would actually have to check the benchmarks myself before I give a confident answer in that. I don't believe there are mobile benchmarks, but I don't want to be quoted on that one. I would need to check.
We'll have a research afterwards, and I'll drop a link in the comments if we find anything, Prashant. And equally, if you can find anything, please do let us know. You gave me a document, Zach, before we came on. Is it worth us going through that to give people a few more insights about what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think given this a little bit of preface before we go into this, Simon, you mind if I do that?
Oh, of course.
So one of the big things that we are really seeing as a trend in the market is vendors are needing to align themselves to a standard so that their clients, as they mature, know where they fit. So what I really learned in my market research, especially at this SMB level, is, there's a lot of turnover. So you basically get this expert come in to handle your security, and a lot of times they're following what they've learned, their internal best practices. It's not necessarily a standard. So when they leave, those internal practices leave with them. Yeah. So it's funny, what we push as vendors is for our clients to follow CIS so that they know their security risks, they know where we fit. And now we're seeing the enterprise say, hey, that's a good point, but why don't I force you as a vendor to tell me where you fit so that I can identify the gaps in my security plan and I can implement solutions that are fulfilling these gaps that I'm focusing on. So that's kind of my transition into this document. If you want to pull that up, Simon.
Yeah, let me get a link, because you can't, anyone who's watching, you can't access this document apart from seeing it on the screen. So I am dropping a link, which I think is to a previous post you've done, Zach, which includes that document. So let me put that in there, and then I'll bring this one. I don't know whether we're going to disappear or not. We might do. We'll see what happens.
If we disappear, I hope we still hear us.
There we go. Well, I mean, it's ridiculous. We're ridiculously small. We'll see how this goes for a bit.
It is a little small, so okay, that's a little bit better.
How about like this? Look.
There we go. That's as big as it's going to get.
I'm going to get rid of the chat. I'm going to get rid of the chat, folks, and I'll see you back in a sec. There we go. That's that.
This is perfect. So what we're looking at here is it's just the title page. But again, to emphasize what Sentian is doing, it's taking the security recommendations from CIS and then implementing them, right? And that's a huge chunk of the battle, right? Implementing the security decision, right? Making that change. But what is that change mapping back to? What risk is it mitigating? So if we open this up a little bit, Simon, CIS is broken up into controls. And there's 18 different controls that are then broken up into implementation groups and safeguards. So this, again, if you haven't heard of CIS, this is definitely a little overwhelming, but they try to make this as digestible as possible to say, hey, all of these controls are made up of sub-controls, or they call safeguards. So there's 153 safeguards. Of these 153 safeguards, the decisions that make them up are going to fall into implementation groups. So IG1 in this case are ones they recommend for every single business to follow, regardless of regulatory compliance, industry, just should do. And then it's only more secure IG2 and IG3. So if you go to this next page here, Simon, we can give a better.
Drinking my coffee then. Hold on. There we go. Yeah.
No worries. So, and And in our space, once we get into the benchmark level, they also break them down further to say L1, L2, next generation, or BitLocker recommendations. So L1 in this case, again, is recommendations across the board and won't be disruptive. But the thing that I feel vendors really need to start doing is what's going to be on this next page here, Simon. So these 18 controls, so it starts with a prioritized list. So controls 1 and 2 are about knowing your asset inventory, whether it's physical or then software, and then it moves towards out after that, right? It's a prioritized list. And where vendors need to begin, in my opinion, helping their customers is saying, hey, my solution specifically helps with control 7, continuous vulnerability management. And it fits into control 7 because it does this. That way, that CISO or that security engineer is no longer saying, oh, I need this tool because it does X and I have a project at hand to do X. It's now saying this solution does X and it's
shows
aligned
where
with this.
where it sits in the bigger picture. Yeah,
exactly.
Makes absolute sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the trend and the conversations I'm having, not just at the SMB level, but even at the enterprise state. Vendors are being asked to really call out where they fit. And there are definitely some people in the community that I'm working with who are putting this very top of mind to try to create some type of validation standard for
vendors. So is this something that
follow.
Sentian can help vendors with, Zach?
Yeah, so this is a document I put together myself. I would be absolutely ecstatic to help other vendors get into the right networks within CIS to get this done. And I did mention sort of like an advisory council is being put together in the background. I won't talk too much towards that, but we want it to be a almost like a certification process, right? If you say you do X, how can we prove that and say that you do confidently align to that? So that's something happening in the background in our industry. Really excited to see where that goes. But yes, Senteon is happy to help with that. And I've actually been running around with an idea in my head of saying, hey, Senteon is implementing the CIS benchmarks, right? They're hardening a Windows server and a Windows workstation. What can we do for vendors to show that their solution is running securely or works rather on a CIS hardened image? So something that I really want to put effort into is finding vendors who want to be part of this mission, install their software on a hardened CIS device, and just see if it works. If configuration drift happens, that could mean there's some technical debt on your end, right?
Yeah, very good. Love it. Next page.
Yeah, I mean, the next pages are just going a little bit deeper than this, kind of mapping out the direct safeguards. But that previous one, man, if you're a vendor in the audience listening today, reach out to me, copy that directly. I think it's something every vendor should have.
No, I completely agree. Do you want me to take that off screen now, or do you want to
keep
flicking
that was a good summary. I appreciate you giving that document a shout out. It's one I'm very passionate about.
No worries at all. It looks like you put a lot of work into that. You gave me some other links as well, didn't you? Let me just check where they are. Here we go. The other neat link for Sentian is this one, which is an ice drive link. Do you want to talk me through this before I drop it in?
Yeah, so feel free to drop that in. So ice drive, think of it, if you haven't heard of it, think of it as like a Google Drive type of folder. Basically, this is where we put all of the resources around Senteon. I am going to be rapidly adding a lot of how-to videos so that all of our partners and our channel resellers are able to confidently share exactly what we do. And there is a special part in there that I really, really like to advocate for called sales enablement. And I think when you are a channel solution focusing on having resellers, crafting a story for them to share is one of the most powerful things. So what I did in there is I put about 11 hypothetical stories. None of the companies are real, but it calls out a challenge that a made-up company is having and then identifies how our solution fits into that challenge and how they can talk towards that challenge and sell in the solution.
I love a case study.
Basically a hypothetical case study. And yeah, it just doesn't have the actual metrics, but it allows them to talk towards it. And it's a lot easier to put a lot of those together because it's my own time.
It's back to storytelling, isn't it? And I think back to the first question, which was how do you get your message in front of people? It's been able to tell a compelling story. And if you can tell a story that relates to other people. I think case studies have always been, I mean, whatever you want to call them now,
Yeah,
a case study is a good way to do that, right? One more
absolutely.
link, which I think is, if you want to get in contact with Senteon, that is the contact page for the website as well. Now, I think we've covered off most of the stuff that we wanted to talk about with Sentian. So what I want to spend the last 10 minutes doing is digging down into Zach a little bit more.
Sure,
Okay,
happy to.
I've got some questions here that I ask all of my guests, and I'm putting together, or Marianne is actually, who's in the audience, putting together a series of YouTube shorts of my guests. So I've got some set questions I'm going to ask now.
Okay.
So I haven't given you a heads up on these either. So good luck, and it isn't a test. So who's been your biggest inspiration? Doesn't have to be work related. Just in life, who's been your biggest inspiration and why?
Man, I mean, the first person that comes to mind is someone who's been really important to me, even in just the last few months. They're almost a new person in my life, and it's actually the gentleman who put us together, Simon, Joshua Copeland.
Good man.
Honestly, he's become more of a friend to me than just a professional network. He is a board advisor to Sentian. He's the CISO for AT&T. I mean, he's an incredible guy, and there's a lot of times in the security space, especially as an entrepreneur, you can feel a little isolated, right? Yes. I love what you're doing with building the community, but overall, it's tough. You know, this work from home culture, entrepreneur, it's isolating, and he's really been someone.
And I think you haven't got to be a certain type of person to do it, but
yeah,
there's a lot of people again on LinkedIn who make out that it's, you know, amazing being an entrepreneur, and it is, right, at times, but also it can be really fucking lonely. Even if, excuse my French, even if you're in a house full of family and people, it can still be super lonely, because if you're building it all on your own, you sometimes don't have people to talk to. And I think the last 2 years for me, I've built up more meaningful relationships with people in this industry than I have throughout my life in person. And very fortunate enough to have met a few of those in real life as well. I think I met Joshua briefly actually in San Francisco this year.
Yep.
At RSA. And no, I think shouting out Josh is a great one. And I've actually got his LinkedIn profile here. Should anyone want to connect with him, he is a great guy. Also known as the unpopular opinion guy, if you haven't come across him before on LinkedIn.
Yep. He's been an incredible mentor and just champion to me in everything security related. But just like any good husband, I mean, I wouldn't be able to do all of the work I did in entrepreneurship without my supportive partner. So that I got to make sure Miranda gets a shout out there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. And we've got another entrepreneur in the chat, Mr. Kennedy, Cody Kennedy. Good to see you. I know he's working like 120 hours a week.
That's how it goes.
To get his startup off the ground, and it's definitely worth the two of you having a conversation, because Cody is going to solve the whole problem we have, in my opinion, which goes back to one of the first questions I asked, which is how do you engage with the right people in the industry? Cody, I don't want to give away too much, Cody, because you're not launching yet. He's building a platform that will allow vendors and leaders and decision makers to connect in a non-threatening, non-sales pitchy way, which I think the industry has been crying out for some time.
Absolutely.
And again, could be well worth getting Senteon involved with that. So I'll do an intro on LinkedIn between the two of you after this call. Brilliant. Okay, next question. When we talked about this briefly when you and I spoke before the show a few weeks back. What drives you to help other people? Because something does.
I mean, it's really just how I came up. I guess, man, what's that personality test called? Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
I know I took that, and one of my top 5, man, I wish I had this in front of me because I know I'm gonna jack it up. I can't remember, but it was something community driven or community focused, right? It was just the want to get everyone involved. And I know one of my top 5 I always get made fun of for was actually woo, because I always get excited about any topic. WOO, just like a woo. You know, the thing that drives me is just seeing people excel and just excited about what they're going to do. I never want someone to feel like they can't try something or can't join a group. I'm all about that community.
Is that down to upbringing? Do you think that's what it is?
Man, nature versus nurture. I don't have a dang clue, Simon. No. I can't give a word to that.
It's hard because I was adopted, so the whole nature versus nurture debate has been one that I've kind of drawn upon quite a lot in my life. But my adopted mum passed away a few weeks ago,
I'm
and
sorry to hear that.
you know, she's at peace now. And the last few years, we became incredibly close. And whether it was a biological relationship or not, you know, she was my mum and she did everything for me. And I think nature versus nurture is a difficult one. I've got 6 children, and 2 of them, sometimes you wish they weren't yours, but I won't name which ones they are.
They don't watch this episode.
They should be in bed, so I'm giving it away now, aren't I? With ages. Okay, next question. What's the best book you've read recently?
Oh man.
And again, doesn't have to be security related. I'm just looking for book lists for myself.
Man, I know. I'm trying to think of the author. From Good to Great is one that I read recently. I think the author is Jim something. But it was comparing 2 businesses that are the exact same, definitely the same market, the same type of niche, but one was successful and one wasn't. And it just kind of outlines the differences between leadership and how important that can be in building a brand and building a company. So that's been something. Jim Collins, that's what it is.
Yeah,
and that's been something that really drove me, along with another mentor of mine, Wes Spencer, to start the CIS webinar series. Because there was a point where I was just like, what's going to separate Senteon from another player who's going to be doing this themselves? Yeah. And to me, it was, I think a big chunk is going to be our educational aspect, that we actually want our clients and our partners to understand what the hell we do and not just install something and then say, I'm secure. We actually want them to understand what we're doing.
Install something and then leave with no resources and no one knowing what they're actually doing. And you probably use 10% functionality of that tool. Now, there's a common story that I've heard.
There's a story.
Over the last 2 years. I've got a quick book recommendation as well. This is by, if I can get it to tune in, What We Call Security by Greg Vandergast. Came out about 4 weeks ago, and it's basically annihilating the way the industry's run, the amount of money we spend on tools, the lack of progress from it, and the fact that we need to get back to basics, which is pretty much what you're saying with the whole ethos of your company. So if you haven't read it,
I'll give that one on my list.
Yeah, highly recommend it. It's available on Amazon, not on Audible yet, which is a shame because when you're nearly 50 like me, you have to sort of wear big goggle glasses just to read it. But we got there.
I also have a guest star trying to get in the video. If you notice my cat climbing on my life-size bear.
What's your cat? What is the cat called?
That's Bruno back there, and I have another one.
Nice to meet you. Last question. What would your advice be to any aspiring entrepreneurs out there in the cybersecurity industry? And you can't say don't do it.
I was going to say the opposite of that. Start doing it, right? Keep your full-time job if you do have that backing, and maybe you are fortunate enough to have a partner who's willing to let you go full-time into it before it's a sure success. That's an awesome situation, but it's rare. So if you are looking, especially to be an entrepreneur in the security space, start. You don't have to drop everything and dedicate full-time out of the gate, but just start. And especially if you do want to build this brand, build this company, make sure you do build that personal brand. Circling back to that initial point that I have, it's 10x harder to build a company when you don't know anyone. And I was one of those people. It took me years until Senteon really found its fit and actually was successful, right? I mean, you asked me a year ago, we were completely different company. But having these connections, having these networks.
It's the adaptability as well, Zach, that you clearly
and listen, right? There's no egos in entrepreneurship. I mean, there's definitely an ego to make the leap. You have to have one. You have to have that grit. But when you're talking to a peer, no ego there, man. You got to listen. You got to take the advice.
Hold on, I can't do 2 things at once. I'm just mocking Jonathan with the clotted cream comment. There we go, done. The other point to that is, and I've been an entrepreneur since I was 15. I've set up and sold successful businesses. I've also destroyed one that was setting up for my retirement, but that's a different story. The one thing I realized, especially after the self-destruction 4 years ago, was that I wasn't actually an expert in everything when it came to the business. So I've very fortunately been enrolled on an online MBA, thanks to a friend of mine, Steve Hindle, based in the US. And I'm doing this at the moment, which is the Power MBA. And we're going through business model analysis and the different angles of analysis at the moment, which is super interesting. Where did you learn all the bits that you needed to know for business? And is there anything you think that you need to brush up on?
I mean, it'd be awesome to get that MBA because I've heard a lot about programs like that. You can really bring in your own business model
Well,
and
this, you
grow
see,
it.
this is what I'm doing. I'm using it as it's a 15-month program, and I'm just using InfoSec Live
Yep.
as the kind of the piece for it. And I'll tell you what, even though I've had 30 years experience running businesses, I've learned more in the last week from this. I
Yep.
really have. And the thing I really like about it, and I'm not on commission for this, and I haven't got a link to show anyone, is the fact that all of the modules are about 15 minutes long. So they're manageable bite-sized chunks. And the people who are instructing you on them, one's the founder of Waze, was the one
Wow.
from the other day. You've got the CMO from YouTube. You've got real people who've actually succeeded in the world. And I'm not saying that if you did a master's at a university, you don't get great lecturers and speakers, but you are at the risk as well of having someone teach you how to do something that they've never actually done themselves.
Yeah.
Which is again my whole problem with the education system, but I won't.
Oh.
I
mean, for me,
that.
for me, I did follow that education system out at Purdue, so I did get a minor in entrepreneurship, and
Oh, wow.
fortunately, since I did do that home restoration business, I learned a lot of the ins and outs of what it takes to grow that brand and to take in this a lot of house painting, right? Taking before after photos, sharing those. So that's really it. And areas for me to brush up at, I mean, constantly, the overall everything. I don't think there's an area that entrepreneurs don't need to be brushed up on, because especially in my role, really focusing on go to market, continuing to hit the growth stage of our company, I don't touch the other pieces. I have co-founders who really dedicate their time towards that. So it really
again, anyone who says they don't need to brush up on anything, I'd be a little bit dubious.
That'd be a little scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was hard to pinpoint just one thing, but I mean, as entrepreneurs, especially if you have a good, I don't want to use the word isolated, but delegation among your co-founders, you really focus on just your role. And I don't have the role of setting up the business anymore, so the legalities or anything.
This
I have
is
a co-founder.
this is. I mean, I'm still effectively working on my own. I've got my oldest son helping out at the moment. He's doing some partnerships stuff for me for the events. My wife helps a little bit, but again, we've got between.
Oh man, my wife helps with all of the designs. Man, she designed our last trade show booth. It's family's awesome.
But it's. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. It's getting the right people around you, and people like Joshua to give you advice, and whoever your other founders are. So, look, Zach, thank you so much for the chat today. Any wise words or words of wisdom to sign off on?
I mean, the commercial from Joe Burrow recently, just start somewhere, do a little bit today. You don't have to go all in, just start.
That's it, completely that. Thank you very much, Zach. It's been a pleasure. Everyone in the audience, thank you so much for tuning in as always. I'm back tomorrow with the CISO experience tomorrow with Alfredo Hickman, who is the CISO for Obsidian Security. Looking forward to that. So if you're going to be around at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. BST, do drop in to see me. And for the rest of you who can't tune in tomorrow, and for the ones who can, have a lovely rest of the day. And we'll catch you very, very soon.